It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Mary Burke, Rudy Grigar, and Shah Ahmadzai to share the Linux Foundation story of build versus buy. Take it away.
All right, that's better. So Marie Burke, I'm Director of Product Marketing for Ternary, and I've been in the FinOps space for 7.5 years, on the vendor side the entire time. Really happy to be here today. This is my 3rd year at FinOps X. Rudy?
And I'm Rudy Grigar. I'm the Director of Cloud Platforms, Cloud Services at the Linux Foundation. This is my 2nd FinOps X, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Shah. I'm the Cloud FinOps Manager at the Linux Foundation. I used to live in San Diego. Super happy to be back here to talk to you a little bit about our Linux Foundation story and hopefully learn from you all throughout the conference.
Okay, quick agenda for today. Going to go through the considerations for build versus buy. Then Rudy and Shah are going to take it away to go through the Linux Foundation's journey with build versus buy. And we'll wrap up with some lessons learned and key takeaways. But we really want this session to be interactive, so get ready to do some show of hands throughout. We will be asking the audience some questions, and we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. All right, so we're really excited that tools and services is now part of the FinOps framework as a capability. Show of hands, I told you it was coming. How many of you are using more than 4 tools currently? Okay, couple of hands. And so this is from the State of FinOps report this year. That is the average number of tools cited, 4.1. And really, every organization is at a different stage of their FinOps maturity. So when you're earlier on, perhaps you're using a combination of spreadsheets, native tools, perhaps you've invested in FinOps platforms and point solutions. We're going to go into all of those on the next slide in some detail. But first, really making sure you understand how to map your business requirements to the capabilities that your organization needs. It's really easy to go down a checklist and say, okay, everything perfectly aligns to the FinOps framework. That's great. But do you need all 27 of those capabilities? What are the real key challenges and business outcomes that your organization is striving for? So if you're an organization that's new to FinOps, perhaps you're just starting to investigate tools and services in the market. Perhaps you're going to build out an RFI or an RFP. This is where it becomes really critical to just hone in on those specific use cases. A good example is automation. We've seen from some of the State of FinOps data that not many organizations are fully automating, commitments or workflows in their environment. So if your organization perhaps has policies restricting automation of a platform, might not be something you need to include in your RFI or RFP. So that's just one example of how, when you're going through these investigations and evaluations for tools, make sure you align those requirements to those use cases. And of course, you've heard this throughout the event, FinOps is collaborative. Bring in stakeholders from other departments. If you're in engineering, talk to the operations teams, the finance teams. If sustainability is a key use case, bring those teams into the conversation as well. More show of hands. We ready? How many folks are still using spreadsheets in some capacity as part of your FinOps practice? Okay, a lot of hands. All right, so either we have some spreadsheets wizards here, or maybe some folks like some torture. That's okay too. All right, how about cloud service provider consoles? Good amount of hands. And so we see, especially with organizations getting started in their FinOps journey, these are 2 of the tools that are being used most often, especially if someone is operating primarily in a single cloud environment. When you get into a multi-cloud environment or more complex use cases, that's when we see third-party FinOps platforms start to come into play. So show of hands if you're using a platform today. Okay, great. Good amount. And so quite a few platforms out there on the show floor. It can be hard to cut through the noise, right? It's overwhelming. The framework, some of these tools may sound the same. And so again, tying back to the previous slide, really hone in on those use cases and what you're looking for. Going to add point solutions here as well. So there are a lot of tools that get classified as platforms, but really they're honing in on a specific use case. Perhaps it's specific to Kubernetes or it's commitment-based management. And so there are solutions in the market that are complementary to the aforementioned solutions on the slide here. So show of hands, anyone using point solutions? Okay, just a few. All right, the topic for today is build versus buy. So very curious to know how many folks in the room are, investing in a homegrown solution, already have one, considering it. Just get a show of hands. Okay, a lot of folks. Great. So some key considerations before you build your own. Time to build. This isn't a set it and forget it kind of tool. When you're building something, you really have to take into account the maintenance of it, as well as the staffing and resources. And resources can be financial, they can be employee-based. If you're a smaller organization, going down the path of build your own may not be the best path for you. If you're a large enterprise with complex environment and org structures, perhaps you do have the resources to go down a homegrown solution path. There's also complexity to take into account. How many cloud providers are you using? Are you pulling in SaaS costs, any other integrations? Impact to productivity. So again, if you're repurposing staff and resources, that is a consideration. Is there any detriment to another area of the business you want to consider? And scalability. And so, a key consideration that brings me back a few years is I remember when Amazon switched from the detailed billing record to the cost and usage report. And it was a bit of a scramble for tools and platforms to adapt to that. And so if you do go down a route of building your own solution, that's something you need to be prepared for that possibility and take into consideration. And so, I'm really just here to set the stage. I'm going to hand things over to Rudy and Shah to go through their experience.
All right, let's talk about the Linux Foundation. Who in the audience is familiar with what the Linux Foundation does? Quite a few people. That's great. Well, it's good to see everybody here on the longest day of the year, and we're going to go on a little bit of a journey with kind of those of you who aren't familiar with the Linux Foundation, what we're doing and where it started. It started back in really 2000, 2007, and has grown significantly since then into all kind of different areas of the cloud, of automotive, of any sort of technology sector that may exist. There's some foundation or some project of the Linux Foundation that is involved in that space, and we're providing a central, neutral hub for open source projects and fostering the development of those projects. So we're relatively small in the number of staff that we have at the Linux Foundation, around 700, I think, including contractors, give or take, with 900 plus open source projects. We're not actively developing on the open source projects. We're providing services to these open source projects, whether it's events, marketing, governance, legal help, finance, IT services, and building products to help foster the growth of these projects. So our mission is really to help grow open source and help make an impact on the world through open source software. As a result of kind of taking anyone in, we have a very large cloud presence. We're not policing projects as they come into the Linux Foundation with where they may host their services, what their hosting looks like, how they're using the cloud. We'll kind of take anyone and anything in any form. And as a result, we've had a very, very rapid growth of SaaS and cloud solutions kind of under our belt, growing significantly over the last 7 years or so at the Linux Foundation. So I'm going to fast forward a bit, from the beginnings here. 2007 was when the open source development labs and free standards group merged and became the Linux Foundation. It started out really around the Linux kernel and kernel-related work. It's grown, big projects like Kubernetes, cloud-native computing projects like Envoy Proxy, other services that are used basically all over, different industry. Automotive-grade Linux is one that's used across the automotive industry. We've grown from that to sort of like taking everything that we can and finding a home for it in whatever platform that project needs to be successful. Some of our Linux Foundation networking projects were built heavily against OpenStack, and so we have an OpenStack managed service provider that's providing OpenStack so that those projects can build, maintain, and grow their development efforts for networking specifically. So there's always some reason that there's a certain cloud chosen or a certain provider chosen for these projects, and we're trying to find ways to kind of continue to foster that growth and also get a grasp on how that spend is happening at the LF. So Fast forwarding a bit to 2017, we started this journey to move everything into the cloud. Whatever it was, we were hosting locally, we were doing on-prem deployments in data centers. There was a push to move kind of Linux Foundation enterprise IT services into the cloud. And through that process, we took a look at different providers, where our skill sets were, and in 2017, naturally, pretty much everything ended up in AWS that was within the Linux Foundation. So, we moved things there, but we also had some needs for Vexos, which was that OpenStack provider we had mentioned, and then the Google Compute Platform hosted some services for kernel and some of our other projects. So we were in 3 clouds basically, and it was time, to build our spreadsheet to be able to track costs and be able to forecast, where things were. It's like, 3 clouds, a dozen different accounts that put in the spreadsheet, we're fine. Fast forward a year, we added 3 more clouds, 4 more clouds, 5 more clouds, and many more projects. So by about 2019, we were struggling with some growing pains here, and we looked into our kind of LFIT support ticket system to actually see where requests were coming, what kind of requests were coming in, what kind of IT services were we needing to scale up. And we built out a tool internally called ITX. And ITX was initially just an IT automation middleware service. So we built this in-house, built it with Go, API gateway, in Amazon, and started plugging into these SaaS providers that we were using for domain management, for email forwarding, things like GitHub, Atlassian tool deployments, and being able to automate these through this REST API layer and be able to map those services to projects, and then eventually build a UI framework on top of this API layer that our program management team, our other engineers at the Linux Foundation, executive directors could actually go in and see and self-service some of these requests that were burdensome to our IT team. So we're moving into these clouds, we're expanding our services, we're doing all this work to automate, and we kept growing. And our cloud spend kept growing, and it was kind of this thing kind of on my back at the beginning of the month. It's like, got to put all the numbers in the spreadsheet, got to take care of all the forecasting for the next month, understand what projects maybe spent more than they should have. It was all manual, and it was getting to be a bit burdensome. I think we had a little over 50 projects kind of being managed, so 50 different accounts in Amazon, Google Compute, Alibaba, name a cloud. We had a little over 50 there, and we continued to add clouds. So DigitalOcean, Equinix, and Packet, a few others. And the cloud spend kept growing, projects kept growing, and the amount of time I was spending on this every month kept growing as well. So fast forward to 2021, we started to take feedback from people that were using our ITX software and really took a look at other parts of the business that we could be expanding what we were doing for IT automation into for self-service configuration of open source projects. So, in our case, we're looking at things like, governance, memberships, IT services that we had already sort of deployed, developer collaboration tools, community management, roles, these different things that were being requested by our stakeholders that were using ITX that were sort of like a layer on top of that beyond IT. So this tool can now, Project Control Center can now control things like committees, meetings. You can go to a single pane of glass and be able to see, this project needs attention on documentation, or this project has, a committee meeting, or this meeting's happening. From a single pane of glass, be able to see kind of everything about an open source project. In our case, and this could apply, to other business cases, outside of open source, building a tool internally and being able to use it to kind of leverage the automation that the cloud has brought. So we'll keep going forward in the story. So we're adding more clouds, tracking more spend, doing a lot more every month in the spreadsheet, and finally made a case to sort of build out a more formal FinOps practice. We had a process in place. It was literally just a spreadsheet. We, I kept, spending more and more time at the beginning of the month or at the end of the month, tracking costs and be able to allocate to projects and doing all these chargebacks and all this extra work. And it was kind of like, okay, this is turning into a full-time job. How do we bring in someone to help formalize and mature our FinOps practice at the Linux Foundation? And it started with getting buy-in from our leadership, which was, after kind of putting the use case and the business case together, pretty easy for us to do once we had kind of established why it was needed, what we're going to do, and how we're going to do it. So, a year ago today, I believe, was Shah's first day at the Linux Foundation, and we brought him in after, kind of identifying how we wanted to move forward. So we needed a tool, we needed some technology to help get out of the spreadsheet. We needed more than that, a person to be able to come in and people to be on board with sort of shifting our focus away from just automating sort of like the IT components of this and actually getting a grasp on all of the cloud spend, all of the accounting, all the finance work involved in moving everything to the cloud, which we've been doing. So I'm going to pass it over to Shah.
All right, thanks so much, Rudy. I'll speak with you all a little bit about our journey and where we're at today, a little bit about where we're headed. I think I'll start with a poll. Has anyone ever had to answer your billing questions, your financial questions with trying to log in here or here or here or here or maybe here? I hope we're not the only ones that have to log into a bunch of different places.
Where are the hands? Come on.
Yeah.
I know you feel this pain.
Yeah, so when either, if I have a question or if we're getting questions being asked of me, I would have to log into a bunch of different places. I'm sure this is a pain that a lot of people can appreciate, right? And even when you're logged into any particular console, there's multiple billing accounts, right? So this gets very, very deep and it gets very complex. And so we understood that this isn't exactly how we would like to continue our operations. And so we've matured a bit. You've heard about this spreadsheet. Blinded by the bills. So as you've heard, we have a lot of projects that are in a lot of different clouds, and it's not very clearly broken out that this project is like 50% here, 50% there. It's a very uneven split, and so in order to try to answer the question, like how much is this project spending or how much is this team spending on cloud infrastructure, we have to look in very many different places, and so our attempt at trying to organize that data was this spreadsheet, this master kind of very, very big and growing spreadsheet. This also, it was very, very helpful, but it's also still subject to and prone to error, right? There's a lot of manual work that goes into managing this. Every single month we have to go in, and continue to add to this. Inevitably, there will be questions that come in from various teams within the Linux Foundation. We need to look back like, hey, 7 months ago, this thing happened, right? And then we have to look back and figure out how we got to the number that's in the sheet. So again, it's not the most efficient way to continue to do business. So to quickly just recap, putting it into the terms of the FinOps framework, I would say we were at a crawl when we were maybe even before the spreadsheet days. Like we had so many different clouds. We didn't really have any consolidated reporting. We had like 900 projects. Like this is what we would consider to be like our crawl, or maybe even like a pre-crawl. Walking, right? So now I would say we're almost walking, or I don't know if power crawl is if that is a terminology that's used or not, but I would say like we're getting there. So like the first bullet under walking there, the chargeback specific to shared cloud environments, we're unique in the sense that we have some projects in the Linux Foundation that operate entirely separate, independent of other projects, because perhaps they're getting cloud credits donated to them that they don't want to be mixed with other projects. So it makes sense for them to do their own sort of billing account and that sort of thing. And from like a chargeback perspective, like that's a little bit easier for us to manage because 100% of that spend gets charged to to one project. But walking here is being able to start doing like cost allocation and chargeback in a shared environment. So not every project is getting their own environment. So when they're provisioning resources in like, let's just say like the master Linux Foundation Google Cloud account, sure, we break things down into like projects and folders and things like that, but remembering that projects start outside the Linux Foundation and then join, there's no like standard naming convention and standard tagging practices and that sort of thing that can really help us with managing all of our spend. So this is kind of our that's our crawl, our walk, and as we as we heard in JR's keynote this morning and on all of our hotel room cards, there are no runners. So I won't say that we're running, but as we aspire to do better in our business, we realize that we want to invest in a FinOps tool. Surprise, surprise, Ternary. If anyone read the title of our presentation here today, we landed on Ternary. But before we got there, we had to understand what capabilities, or essentially what are our requirements. And not just our requirements, but like thinking about the FinOps framework, all the different personas, engineering and finance and product, and like the FinOps practitioners themselves. We wanted a tool that can help add value to all these personas. And taking a look at the graphic there, this is not, I've seen some organizations, I hope none of us are doing this, but this is not something that you graduate from. It's not like I need to be informed and now I'm informed, so now I will optimize, and now I'm fully optimized, so now I'll just operate. It doesn't work that way. It's a cycle that you're continuously looping through, and so we wanted a tool that can help us through this whole phase on a continuous basis. And so just from an informed perspective, multi-cloud reporting and persona-based reporting is, I'd imagine, like almost a hard requirement for just about anybody in the room. So being able to have reports for leadership that doesn't show Kubernetes cluster optimization recommendations because they probably don't want to see that, or having reports that go out to engineers that don't have all of the Linux Foundation financials in there. That's not relevant to them. So that stuff is obviously very, very key for us. Budget reconciliation and forecasting. For those that are not aware, the Linux Foundation is a not-for-profit. We don't charge for services. So the way that we continue operations is by accepting donations, by accepting credits from various service providers. And in order for us to do that, we need to very clearly be able to convey, this is what we have spent and this is where we're trending. And so having a tool to help us do that was crucial. And we're amongst friends here, so I can share a story of us preparing to apply for credits from one of the cloud providers. There's a whole process behind that. We ended up getting the credits granted to us, and then we just blew through the credits a lot faster than we thought or we would have hoped for. So then it poses another issue. So having a tool to help with those sort of things was very, very key. And then optimizing and operating, a tool that can go beyond the standard idle VM and right sizing and commitment purchasing. Like those are great recommendations to have, but something that can add any additional recommendations there was something that we were looking for. And then lastly, the organizational adoption of FinOps. That's something to my earlier point of personas. Like we want this to be adopted by everybody or by the masses at least. It shouldn't be just something that our core team uses. And so ease of use and that sort of thing was very, very key. So we invested in a FinOps platform. We invested in Ternary, and this is a screenshot. Perhaps it might not be the clearest thing to see, but this is now our single-ish source of truth. We're ingesting majority of our cloud spend into Ternary, which is something that prior to this we've never done. So now we have the ability to look at one particular Linux Foundation project, go to one place and see how much it's spending across all of the different clouds. So this has been a capability it's still new to us. So it's been great having this so far. And another thing that Rudy and I and that our team has been really trying to do, if there's like two words that you take away from this slide, is self-service. We don't want to be the gatekeepers of this type of information. And for anyone familiar with how like the cloud consoles work, especially in a shared environment, if we were to grant viewer access, for example, to somebody in a shared environment, they would have access to all of the project billing data in that, attached to that billing account. And so that's something that we didn't want to do. And so historically, the access to the billing data has really just been with our team. And so now that we have this tool, we're able to give teams access. So imagine teams have been provisioning resources and not having access to their own billing data. It's pretty inefficient. So now that is the case. They can view their own data. we've been able to build default dashboards, taking into consideration the various personas and what they would like to see. And we build it once, and we just avail these dashboards to the relevant teams. And with using, like in this screenshot, there's something called scoped views in Ternary. It's essentially granular permission sets that we can assign to a user that they're only able to see the billing data relevant to their project. So this has been very huge for us. From a user experience perspective, you don't have to log into different consoles and go to the Explorer and then go to something else, depending on the platform. From a user experience perspective, we've built an onboarding guide onto Ternary. We've been able to share the same set of instructions to people within the Linux Foundation, and they've been able to follow those steps, and then you'll get access to just your billing data will be different. A lot of things that we've been able to address with the onboarding of a FinOps tool. Like another thing, giving teams the ability, again, self-service, to create their own budgets and alerts. This is something that, like I'll use Google Cloud as an example. In Google Cloud, you're only able to create the budget at the billing account level, not at the project level. And if we're not giving teams access to the billing account, then that means they would have to go through us and ask us to create a budget, and then as their needs change, to update their budget. And keep in mind, there's so many different projects. So a lot of times, budget creation is just not happening. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't happening as much as we would like. And so now, teams can go and create budgets, and we're not the gatekeepers of this billing data. So again, self-service, empowering teams to do their own, choose their own adventure has been key for us. And now I think I'll pass it back to Rudy to continue talking about our journey.
Yeah, so back to this fun timeline here. The takeaway, reflecting on the journey so far, is that really I wish we had started on this sooner. The longer we waited, the more difficult it has been to get a grasp on kind of all the different clouds, all the different spend, all the different projects that we're using. So, looking back, it's like, I wish we had done this when we only had like 12 projects that we were managing. The lack of the tooling, in a way, and the lack of the people and the process was really technical debt that we had to tackle and dig our way out of. So, I think we're making good progress toward that. And I think along the way, we've also, through ITX and PCC, found the need for more self-service within the Linux Foundation. So, if a technical steering committee from a project needs to, be able to do something and action something on their project, they don't have to submit a support ticket, go through a bunch of emails, try and get the right person in IT to come and service that request. And I think what we're trying to work toward is the same ability for people that need financial data about their project, about their cloud spend, whatever it might be, to be able to do that in a self-service way. So, doing that holistically is challenging because we have so many cloud vendors, but really, after doing kind of crunching the numbers, like probably 90% of our spend is across 4 clouds, maybe 5 if you include some of the OpenStack work. So, finding a tool that kind of fit that need and that use case was really powerful. The last bit is that because we have so many clouds and SaaS providers and other tools, like there's still a spreadsheet. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to track it somewhere. So it probably will never die. But if there's a new tool in the market, if there's new features in Ternary that support that, we're going to adopt that because we don't want to have to continue to build that. And I don't want to continue maintaining that, neither does Shah. So we're working, we're moving forward. And, as you said, there's no runners. We're still figuring this out as we go. So, you may have guessed this, next up, Project Control Center. We already have the framework. We already know, the project mapping to the foundation, to the, the business unit, to the people involved, what we're building toward. We already have everything in place for that, for IT services, for meeting management, for all of these things. And the next step here is to leverage Ternary's API endpoints, leverage our IT service middleware, interact with Ternary, and be able to map high-level data for people like executive directors, program managers, and project members to be able to see and forecast their cloud spend. So that's sort of where we're at today and what's next. It's not going to be an easy journey to get to this next point here, but we want to be able to map all of these projects and foundations and business groupings in Ternary back to our central source of truth within Project Control Center. We have to work with the product engineering team to get this on the roadmap, work through kind of how they're seeing it surface in the application, and then also working to drive, with Shah's help, onboarding to Ternary, onboarding to PCC, how to, FinOps best practices, how to use all this tooling that we're putting together, that we're building and buying, and using that to mature our forecasting, and adding new data sources, integrations. So we're using Snowflake as a data cloud. We don't have that integrated yet into Ternary. It's not a big spend for us, but it's something that we want to get in place. We also want to be able to do things like Jira Cloud integrations to be able to have these project communities. If there's a budget alert that goes off, have it open the Jira ticket in the right spot for that community to address, and make that also self-service from the tool. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Marie.
Okay, another show of hands. You ready? You still with us? How many folks have recognized our jackets here from Ted Lasso? Okay, so a couple folks have seen the show, and you may be wondering, how does this tie into FinOps? What's going on here? And so it's exactly what Rudy and Shah have mentioned and what the FinOps Foundation has talked about in today's keynotes. There are no runners. For folks who haven't seen the show, Ted went from being an American football coach to a British, professional soccer coach, or football, as many call it. And he didn't really know what was going on with that sport. He wasn't really sure what his journey was going to be. But he had a very positive mindset. He was surrounded by people. He had a process and a methodology that he wanted to pursue. And so really the takeaway here is we're all still learning. Vendors, cloud providers, practitioners, everyone's on this journey. We're all constantly iterating and improving. And that brings us to the key takeaways for today's session. So we often hear it's either build or buy. You've probably heard that, or someone's asked you about that a few times. But why not both? Why can't you invest in a solution that gets you 80% of the way there, 90% of the way there, and then leverage APIs and integrations to build on top of that? And again, going back to our earlier considerations, thinking about your staffing, your resources, why not invest in something that can help you along your journey? Mapping the business requirements of the scope. So, Rudy and Shah went through some of their pain points and use cases. Some of their pain points and use cases may not be the same ones that your organization has. And so as you're exploring tools and options in the marketplace, really think about what those pain points and challenges are. Perhaps you're focused on unit economics, or you really want to go deep on cloud sustainability. Hone in and do your due diligence and find those solutions that match well with what your organization's needs are. And lastly, don't forget, FinOps is people, process, and technology. As many personas in your organization that you can collaborate with will make your practice better. Adopting a process that works for your organization, working on internal controls, governance frameworks, leveraging the work of the FinOps Foundation, and then technology, investing in the right solution for your organization. And so this is a sponsored session, so going to give a quick little pitch here for those of you who've maybe never heard of Ternary. But we're a team of early FinOps adopters and thought leaders. Our founders were FinOps practitioners. Many of us came from some of the most well-adopted solutions in the market. And the reason that matters is because we have a lot of lessons learned as well. And we're using those lessons learned to inform our process and our technology and how we work with customers and partners. And on the technology front, given the session of build and buy, we are building the platform for your organization to build on top of it. We want to partner with you on that. We're making our APIs accessible. We're integrating with Snowflake, Jira Cloud, and many more integrations to come. And the real takeaway is we're customer-focused mindset. We're a small but mighty team, and we're agile and we're ready to partner with you. So if you are interested, come talk to us. If you go with another tool or solution, that's great. Find what works for your organization, and we hope you have a very successful FinOps journey in practice. With that, we'll open it up for questions.
In keeping it with the sports theme, yeah, okay. Spoiler alert, I'm going to make you clap again in 10 minutes. Keeping with the sports theme, this is called a catch box, which means I get to practice sports and throw it at you, and you have to catch it when you have a question. It says on the bottom I can't throw it at your head, but that's fine print. Questions for the group? Who would like to start? Knew there'd be one. Ready?
Can you hear me? All right. So it's pretty interesting. We have this conversation a lot on build versus buy, and you guys touched on it a couple of times. You're thinking about all these integrations that you want to build. The product never gets you all the way there. There comes a time when you say, hey, I've got this N number of dollars to spend. Am I going to spend it on buying an engineer, or am I going to go give it to the vendor? How do you kind of weigh that, like opportunity cost versus sunk cost versus like how is the vendor going to solve these needs for me in the long term? So, part of my job as an engineer, right? I'm obviously going to be biased towards the build, but how would you pitch that? Hey, here is how we should think about what is the right ROI on this. Should I spend the money on extra engineering, or should I spend the money on the tool? And what I've seen in the FinOps space is a lot is you end up buying these tools and they never get you all the way. You always got to go build some ETL pipeline to say, I'm pulling your data into my house. And then you say, okay, I've got to go build the engineering organization that has the muscle to go build all these ETL and transformation pipelines. Once you now have that engineering horsepower, you find out that really what the vendors are doing are building ETL pipelines and dashboards. But now you've got the team that can do that anyway. So I don't know, it's a little bit of a balance that I'm finding.
Yeah, I can answer that one. I think, going back and looking, a year ago, kind of coming to the FinOps X, we hadn't selected a tool yet. And part of why I had come, and Shah was starting his first day, but he wasn't here, was to understand like what the tooling was, what the technology was, what it could provide. And, going through that process and kind of like meeting with the different, vendors and understanding sort of like where the tools are focused, because they all seem to have similar but different, focuses on what they were doing. And seeing that, Ternary had sort of that support for like a large breadth of accounts, it was kind of check that box for us. It also had the ability to, integrate with its REST API. So if we did need to extend it, we had the ability to do that. And then after, going into kind of like the discussions on, setting up a contract with Ternary and all of that, I mean, it really came down to they were acting almost like an extension, like an augment of our team in that way, and be able to partner at that level with the vendor was really beneficial to us because, if we have feedback or feature requests or like, hey, new Cloud X is giving us $10 million a year in credits for Kubernetes, how do we support that? And being able to go to that vendor and say, hey, we really need this, can you build it? And if not, then, we'll build it in-house. But for the most part, getting our spend in place and getting our cost tracked was something that Ternary gave us kind of out of the box. And that partnership has been part of why it's been so successful, I think, from like a ROI standpoint, because we didn't have to invest in a team. And it's very hard for us to hire people full-time at the Linux Foundation. It's just, we're a small set. Yeah. The people really building all the technology are the people that are volunteering or, working at, Microsoft or Google or AWS and developing that infrastructure. So we have to be agile ourselves and not, have any like long-running cost of people. So, if we could augment that person cost with the tool, we try and go that route. Since we already have an engineering team building out Project Control Center, though, in the IT automation framework, it was an easy sort of like, let's slot that in there. We already have all the foundation in place. We just need to start building the integrations back to the Ternary platform. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent presentation, by the way. Following on the discussion with regard to engineering resources versus buying external, it seems that one of the driving factors is also where the data resides relative to, is it on-prem in your organization, in your cloud environment, or in a third-party vendor's environment. And I'm thinking not just cloud spend data, which has certain sensitivity, but go to unit economics, and now you've got, very sensitive sales and financial data. How did that factor in your particular case, and maybe broadly for Ternary, into the different tools that you might look at and the architectures you might take in this regard?
I can answer some of that. We're not using anything at that level that I'm aware of, as far as like unit economics goes, back to our projects. I think where we've really been focused is on the cloud spend area, because that was a new kind of a net new thing, and how we charge that back to projects. But we were aware kind of going into it that there's going to be things that like Ternary is not going to be able to provide for the business. It's not a silver bullet. There's going to be more data. Last year, the announcement of Focus, that was a big plus for us, because the eventual hope that we have some standard format that we can start using if we are going to start building ETL pipelines and start transforming this data, that we have a standard that we can adopt and be able to use there to drive more parts of the business that way. And we're also always looking for new tools. Like if there's a new tool that would help grab that other 10% of spend and be able to map it into our current use case, we'll adopt it without question. And if Ternary's building features and functionality that can do that, then we get it's free for us at this point. So I think that's kind of how we've approached that problem. But we weren't super linked in with our finance team for all of the other stuff that they're doing. We were really just trying to solve the cloud cost issue with our initial FinOps practice here.
So in other words, where the data sat to get access to the good reports didn't really matter as much to you.
No, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and then just to answer another part of your question, for Ternary, we do have unit economics. If you want to plug into Datadog, you want to do custom metrics, we can help you monitor and map that to whatever type of unit you want to measure. If you're a shoe company, cost per shoe. If you're an airline, cost per flight or booking reservation. We are investing in that. And you also mentioned SaaS, and we've heard that that's coming up more and more. It's definitely an area we're interested in exploring and understanding those use cases. So would love to connect with anyone who's interested in elaborating on that.
Other questions? 2 or 3 more minutes? Yeah, in the back.
All right.
I'm just curious, now that you've got better unit measure cost, if you use your data now to help show cost of projects to maybe get more credits or help people from a fundraising or standpoint.
You want to answer that one? You've been most involved, I think, in recent.
Yeah. So I think our journey with Ternary is 6 months in-ish, something like that. So the initial sprint that we went through was to start ingesting all of our spend data from all the various sources. We've just recently started giving access to various project teams. But yeah, there was a team, there was one of the open source foundations, part of the LF, that was going through a credits application process with AWS. And in order to answer the questions that they had, or the questions that they originally asked me, I would have previously had to go through the AWS Cost Explorer, do a bunch of filtering, that sort of thing. But instead of that, I gave them our onboarding guide onto Ternary. They're able to get in, get access, and use all the information that we had available there for their credits application process, and essentially not cut me out, but they were able to do that all self-service. So it was very, very helpful.
Marie, Rudy, Shah, thank you so much. A big round of applause for our presenters.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.